everybody. My name is Brian Bouchard. I am the board chair of the Red Deer Downtown Business Association. I am very pleased to be your host this evening, and we are very excited that you've decided to join us for the Talking Places Introduction to Placemaking, brought to you by Capstone and the Red Deer Downtown Business Association. I'd first like to acknowledge the Indigenous traditional territories represented by Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 as the lands our city is situated on. This land is also acknowledged as an historic Métis gathering site. In addition to formally acknowledging this land as Indigenous land, we pledge to learn, include, and support. In honor of that, we encourage everyone to attend the Powwow Times International Gathering this coming weekend at Westerner Park. A few quick housekeeping items. If you haven't found them already, the washrooms are located in the basement, which are accessible via the stairs in the lobby, and there's also one single accessible washroom at the back of the theater next to the booth. In the event of an emergency, please proceed through the front doors and across the street in front of Days Music. I'd also like to mention we have several members of Red Deer City Council joining us here this evening. If you could give us a wave when I say your name. Councillor Diane Whitejez, Councillor Bruce Karuma, and Councillor Vic Dirksen. Is Lawrence Lee with us as well? We'll clap for him. Thank you guys for joining us. If you've ever heard the term placemaking and wondered what it's all about, you've come to the right place. In just a moment, we'll introduce you to our keynote speaker this evening, who comes to us all the way from Vancouver, British Columbia, Miss Cherry Hassami. Cherry is the Director of Operations and Wellbeing at Happy Cities, whose team works with cities, developments, and nonprofits around the world to maximize the well-being impact of public spaces, streets, and infrastructure. Cherry is an urbanist and engagement specialist. She spearheads inclusive community engagement initiatives. Whether it's public spaces, accessible plans, or placemaking master plans, Cherry employs thorough engagement methods to ensure that people of all ages and abilities have a say in how their cities are designed, creating more inclusive and functional urban environments. So without further ado, let's give a nice warm Red Deer welcome to Cherry.
Got the microphone. Test, test. Is that okay? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. As mentioned, my name is Cherry Hassami, and I've come to you all the way from Vancouver, which is truly quite a quick flight away, but I'm happy to be here. Oh, there's me. Okay, so we're talking about placemaking today. Before we go any further, before we even get into it, I'm going to do a quick temperature check. With a show of hands, would you call yourself a placemaker? Okay, excellent, excellent. Good proportion in the room. We're going to keep that in mind as we go on today. Before we do that, what is placemaking? As mentioned, we're going to do an introduction on placemaking, so I'm starting from the very beginning. Placemaking, if you were to Google it, first of all, you might get auto-corrected to peacemaking. But placemaking comes up with a lot of complicated definitions. You might get a strategy, a framework, lots of big words. So I went through those big words and found one of the more simple definitions on the internet that I could find for you today. So placemaking are the community initiatives that aim to improve a place. So we're going to sit with that for the first few slides here. As we go through, I'd like to share visual examples of successful placemaking. Maybe some of you, most of you are familiar with the High Line, built on a former elevated rail line. The local community in New York City gathered and rallied to turn it into a public park, which is now internationally recognized, well known, and it connects visitors and tourists alike. A little bit closer to our home and my home specifically, we have Granville Island, another example of successful placemaking where formerly industrial land was turned into one of the most popular public spaces in Vancouver. Again, bringing tourists, visitors, and it's now home to over 300 businesses and 3,000 employees. So another big, kind of large-scale success story. However, placemaking does not need to be gigantic or expensive or necessarily bring tourists from around the world. This is another example of placemaking. Placemaking can be as simple as little moments like this, little elements of joy, things that spark joy. In case you can't exactly tell what's going on in this photo, those are painted shadows on the ground to look like little critters. An example from my birthday Placemaking can also be as simple as painting a mural on the ground, like right here in Red Deer, to show the care or the presence of a community. So placemaking is less about design, despite the flashy photos that I just showed you. It's less about design and more actually about the process that goes into getting to that outcome. Placemaking is collaborative, it's context-specific, it is community-driven, which is very important. It's inclusive, it's dynamic, it's always changing, and I'm going to be going through examples of these today. Placemaking, on the other hand, is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You're not going to see the same thing work in a bunch of different communities. It's not top-down, so again, really coming in from the bottom up to be community-led. It's not design-focused, again, despite the cool designs we just looked at, it's more about the process. And it's not a quick fix, it's also not static, so it's going to be a long-term evolving project. Most importantly, placemaking puts people first, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. Placemaking is not about cars, buildings, infrastructure, although they are often involved. Placemaking is really centering the community. So at Happy Cities, we say that placemaking is a tool for happy, healthy, resilient communities. But before I go any further, I'm going to take a quick pause. You know, what is a happy, healthy city anyway? So as you heard, I work at a company called Happy Cities. A little bit of context for those of you who may or may not know, maybe might. Happy City was originally a book written by our founder, Charles Montgomery. So Charles spent over a decade doing research on the connection between urban design and well-being. So trying to understand how the communities we build, the cities we create can influence our health, our well-being, and ultimately our happiness. Long story short, years later, the book did really well, and it turned into the consultancy where myself and my colleagues work today. So at Happy Cities, we say that we use an interdisciplinary approach to understand the science of happiness, which is basically a fancy way of saying we take research and elements from all these different fields like psychology, public health, neuroscience, behavioral economics, sociology, and we put together what we call a recipe for urban well-being. So we know at Happy Cities that the way we design our cities can boost or break our well-being, and this is really our ethos and what we spend all of our time thinking about and all of the work that we do. But what do we really mean by well-being, especially when we're talking about cities? Like, what does that actually mean? Well-being in the context of cities has several different elements. Of course, it's our physical health, how healthy we are in those senses, but also social connection. How many friends do we have? Do we feel like we belong to something in the community? Do we feel a sense of meaning? Do we feel safe and comfortable navigating our streets? And so research shows that these aspects of well-being can really be impacted by the environments we live in. So I'm going to share a few examples of research that backs that up. So for example, we know that encounters with strangers can make us happier. So the number of social ties someone has can directly influence how happy and healthy they feel. So for example, research has shown that even what might seem like a meaningless interaction with a barista or someone that you bump into down the street can have the same impact on your health and well-being at the end of the day as encounters with friends and family. So when we're thinking about cities, we want to think about how do we create places that can help boost those social interactions and have that positive impact on our well-being. Another example from some research we've done shows that the environments we live in can actually influence the choices we make, whether we decide to walk or roll or cycle or drive in our communities. So for example, in the environment on the right, which would be considered a walkable, human-scale environment, shoppers will happily walk up to 800 meters without really batting an eye. Comparatively, in the environment on the left, they're not so happy to walk even 200 meters. Actually, they'd rather get back in their cars and drive over to the next parking lot if they have to. So we know that, again, these choices that we make can influence active transportation choices and then therefore boost people's overall health. Another quick example that I love to share is that we know that the quality of our environments can influence how people treat each other and how nice people are to each other. So we did this experiment many years ago now outside of Seattle where we had an actor, pretend to be a lost tourist. We literally had her out there with a gigantic map looking stressed and lost and confused many years ago, hence the map. And so we had her do the exact same things in both environments. So we found that in the environment on the right, people were 5 times more likely to stop and offer her help compared to the environment on the left. And we can attribute these changes to the changes in the environment. So if you look at the environment on the right, you know, there's color, there's granularity, there's detail, there's storefronts, what we call an active edge. There's lots of reasons to stop and linger, whereas in the environment on the left, not a lot going on. So when designing our cities, these are the types of things we want to keep in mind, that we're intentionally creating cities that can have a positive impact on our well-being. So all that to say is we do this at Happy Cities. That's what I'm up here to share with you today. So we apply that research to inform placemaking master plans, we do community planning, we design public spaces or multifamily housing. And one of the things that we do, and it's about to point at the very bottom, is the inclusive public engagement. And that's really my bread and butter, or what I spend a lot of time doing at Happy Cities. And the important part here is that, you know, when we're doing these cool changes, we make these infrastructure changes to the city, we really want to figure out who is going to be impacted by this work and how can we make sure that they're aware of it, involved in it, and are supporting the work, or at least able to have a say in this work, because we know that this is ultimately going to influence their day-to-day lives and their well-being through all this research. And the reason this is super important is that traditional public engagement, as you know, sometimes looks like this. It's an open house, it's not really that exciting, or it's a survey or something that people aren't that excited to do. And ultimately, these efforts end up reaching only the people who have the time or the energy, the money to take off time off work, or feel that they should be there, or they're confident enough to show up to these settings and say, this is what I think. So unfortunately, that means a lot of people end up being left out of the opportunity to shape their cities. And at Happy Cities, equity, diversity, inclusion is a big part of our work. So we know that for a project to succeed, the community has to really be behind it and be involved. And this means all members of the community, not just those who have the time and energy to show up to an open house. So we try to do things a little bit differently. We try to make things fun, you know, very simple, but give people a reason to be there. Make them feel like their time is being valued, or it's actually worth it for them to be there. Sometimes we offer free food. Sometimes we genuinely pay people to show up. You know, just to make sure that they feel like there's a reason for them to be there and that their voice is actually going to be heard and make a difference. And this way we can try to reach beyond the kind of usual suspects who might show up to an open house or take a survey, because we know that city building is relevant to people of all ages and abilities and backgrounds. So back to placemaking. Where were we? So I mentioned before, placemaking puts people first. That means that people themselves have to play a key role in shaping this place. As we're saying, we're trying to improve and shape a place. So I'd like to, with all the context I just gave you, propose a refined definition of what I showed earlier. So redefine placemaking as the collaborative community initiatives that aim to improve the shared value of a place from the bottom up. So I'm going to dissect why I added all these words for you and then go into some examples. So collaborative and shared value are super important because placemaking brings the community together around a shared vision or a goal. And the bottom-up component is also very important because this isn't about some higher authority or some key decision maker saying, you know, a plaza has to go here, or we have to paint this blue. It's really about what does the community want to see. So I'm going to take a couple project examples and highlight the difference between top-down and bottom-up, so you can hopefully see what I mean. So we're going to start in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. This is a project that Happy Cities did in 2019, which does feel like a lifetime ago now. So for a little bit of context, the city of Rotterdam had noticed that in one of their lower income neighborhoods called Bloemhof, which I'm probably saying horribly incorrectly, so they noticed that the walkability rates in youth were lower than average in the city. So young people were not walking very much. And they thought, okay, let's give them more reasons to walk. Let's put in a network of plazas and public spaces and make the city more aesthetically pretty for them and get them to boost walkability rates. They brought us on board and we thought, okay, this is great. You know, a city that cares about placemaking, they care about engaging a group that's not often represented in city and civic processes. So we set off to Rotterdam. There's us talking to people. So we set off, we spent several weeks in the city and we truly talked to people. We got to know them. We had one person introduce us to the next and the next and the next and got to get to know the day-to-day rhythms of this community. And of course we had to reach the youth, which wasn't as easy as we wanted it to be. We definitely stood out in the community. We stuck out and they didn't really want to talk to us, but long story short, we found this fellow by the name of Mohammed. You'll see him in a lot of the photos. So he was kind of a key connector in the city because he knew the youth really well and he ran a community center for them. So through him, we got to reach this group of young gentlemen and we started to see the city through their eyes. So as I mentioned, we tried to make things a little more interesting for them through these engagement sessions. We organized walking tours. We got this cool Dutch photographer to come and teach them how to take photos for their Instagram. So you'll see them taking photos. And so through this, we thought, okay, let's let's ask them, what's your favorite part of the city, or where would you like a public space to be, to kind of get that information from them. And what became pretty clear very quickly was that they actually had zero interest in the public realm. They didn't want it. They didn't even want to spend time there. They didn't want a public plaza. They actually told us that whenever they hang out in the public in large groups, it's like highly likely that someone's going to call the cops on them, because in this neighborhood, the idea of having a group of teenagers hanging out outside was actually not appreciated or welcome. So they didn't want to do that at all. So public plazas were really not going to accomplish anything for this group. They wanted more indoor spaces to hang out with their friends, somewhere that wasn't their parents' living room and wasn't outside, some middle ground. But we also heard from them that a lot of the neighbors and residents in this community, their parents included, were newcomers. So they didn't really know each other very well. There wasn't a lot of trust in the community. And importantly, there wasn't a lot of trust between the residents of the community and the city. So, plot twist for us, we actually ended up going back to our client, the city of Rotterdam, and we said, we really don't think you should put in a bunch of plazas. We don't think this is going to land. The kids have told us that they don't want any. And we actually encouraged them to stop that project, go into the community, and we created these co-creation workshops with them. We connected them with the people that we've met, and we said, okay, we're going to use the rest of our time here to make sure that you can continue nurturing these relationships and get to know the needs and the priorities of your community first. So all in all, in some ways you could say that we failed our project because we didn't install plazas. However, we do still see this as a success because we were able to build capacity in the community and start building these relationships that the city unfortunately would not have pulled off on their own. And importantly, we prevented a fairly half-baked, super expensive series of parklets from happening, which really wouldn't have landed well with the community they were trying to reach. And it probably would have been actually broken that trust more in a community that was already fairly skeptical that their local government was on their side. So with that, I'm going to take us to the other side of the world. The other second story I wanted to explain. We're now in New Westminster, which is a city outside of Vancouver in the Lower Mainland. If any of you have been there, it's quite cute. So this story took place, like I said, very close to our home. And it started because a young middle school student by the name of Chloe, reached out to her city. She wrote an email and said, hey, listen, me and my classmates really like biking to school, but we're starting to notice that cars are going way too fast in the school zones, and if you don't do something about it, we're probably going to stop riding our bikes. Very proactive young student, I must say. So the city was great. They made some, added some stop signs, tweaked some things, but they wanted to do a little bit more, so they reached out to us, and we came up with an idea. So because we heard that this was a very student-led initiative and that it really started from in the hands of these kids, we thought, okay, let's keep it there. Let's keep that momentum going. And so we thought one thing that would really help at the school was to install bump outs outside of the intersection where cars were going too quickly. And as a quick mini lesson, bump outs are, you've probably seen them, they're sort of where the sidewalk bulges out, gets wider, and so the reason they slow cars down is they create a narrower path for cars to drive through, so they have to slow down. It also creates a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians, so a couple different ways as to why this is a safety mechanism for pedestrians and cyclists. So we came up with this bump out idea. We wanted to install them with paint, and so we went into, this is us teaching the students during the COVID days outside. And so we had a little urban planning lesson. We taught them about bump outs and about active transportation. And then we encouraged them to submit their designs for these painted bump outs. I actually think it was a mandatory assignment, which was very handy for us. So they all submitted their artwork. And they also got to vote for their favorite design. So it was a student-created, student-selected process, and then we invited those who wanted to participate, this time it was optional, to come and paint with us at the end of the summer. So the result was that all four corners of the intersection were designed and painted for and by the students. Unfortunately, you can only see two of them in this cool aerial shot. And so while the students might not have set out to be placemakers, they really played a key role in bringing this public space project to life, giving them a sense of contributing to their community while also accomplishing those goals of creating safer streets for those walking and biking to school. I'll never forget, I was also there painting, I'll never forget, as an aside, overhearing one student say to their friend as we were rolling paint, oh, I can't wait to bring my kids here in 20 years and show them how we made the streets safer. I had many thoughts about that, including that this is technically temporary paint, but nonetheless, very heartwarming to see. So both of these stories show examples of how the community's perspectives really helped shape the process. The design was, although aesthetically pleasing, not always the priority. And so they highlight the importance of putting the power of placemaking in the hands of the experts, the local community. In one example, the city of Rotterdam realized this a little bit too late after the fact. And in the other example, this power was right there in the hands of the students from the start. So you might at this point be wondering, okay, Cherry, that's cool. There's a bunch of paint on the ground. Like, what is the point? What difference does this really make? So recently, Happy Cities has actually embarked on a study of the well-being impacts of placemaking initiatives to try to understand exactly that. Like, what is the value of these types of projects? What impact are they having on people's well-being? So I'm excited to share this with you today. This project is actually being worked on probably as we speak. We're almost done working on it, and this is in partnership with the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. So the following slides are super fresh and they have yet to be shared, but I was excited to have some content to share with you today. So this project, as I mentioned, we're trying to figure out the well-being impacts of placemaking. There's two main components to it. One was largely desk research, so seeing what evidence is already out there, who's done studies on their placemaking work, to sort of start building this case for placemaking. And the other half of the project has been hearing from communities and local placemakers to hear about their success stories. So we've been able to draw out some key learnings for you today. So, for example, through our research, the desk research side, we've found that playful streets can boost health and happiness for kids. So for over 2 decades, way ahead of us over there in Belgian cities, they've been closing some of their larger streets during the summer months just for a couple hours in the afternoon to give children who are not in school during those months more room to play. And they found that kids sit 64 minutes less per day as a result of this and spend 14 more minutes in vigorous play. So a pretty clear connection there between health and these pedestrian streets. Over back in Vancouver, we've also found that safe streets can support active transportation choices, like I was mentioning before, and the community. So the city of Vancouver actually this year tested out a pilot where they closed the streets around a few of the elementary schools and some of the high schools, kind of at the pick up and drop off zones. So normally those times where there'd be super car-oriented moments around the school. And they found that 23% of families and 33% of high school students actually reported walking more to and from school as a result of this. And interestingly, what we're very excited about is that 82% of people said that they felt more connected to their community as a result of this program. We've also found that street interventions like plazas can help connect neighbors. So this is a research project that I worked on actually in 2018. So the City of Vancouver has a program called the Pavement to Plaza program, where they take underused road space, the roads that aren't really being fully utilized by vehicles, and they'll convert them into social gathering spaces, so plazas, hence Pavement to Plaza. But they'll do this using very low-cost interventions like paint or movable seating, planters, nothing too fancy. And so we set out to collect some data on this, and we found that the people using the plaza, they were 33% more likely to say, yes, this is a place where I'd like to meet new people. And so this is, again, supporting that narrative that little interventions like this can have an impact on people's sociability and their social connections. The final example I'll share with you today is that we found that pedestrian streets can actually boost business. So this is an example from Montreal. For the past 5 or so years, Montreal has been pedestrianizing 10 of their major streets. And on one street, they found that through this program, business vacancies were dropped from 14.5% in 2018 to 5.6% in 2023. So another example of the impacts of placemaking, of overall community well-being. And so many of these examples are city-led. However, regardless, they're still supporting the importance of placemaking efforts in building those happy, healthy, resilient communities that I've been talking about. So through this project, as I mentioned, there's 2 halves to it. One was the desk research, and the other half was collecting heartwarming, frankly, stories from across the country. So we were trying to figure out now the process of evaluating these more grassroots projects, but I wanted to share some of the other nice ones with you today. Whereas the evaluation process will be the next step of this work. Regardless, all these stories really reinforce the idea that anyone can be a placemaker. It doesn't have to be this large-scale, fancy, complicated process to make a difference. So starting over in Saskatchewan, in Silton, Saskatchewan, a group of community volunteers got together and they built essentially a large wooden deck, that's all, outside of their town hall, which they've been lovingly calling the platform. So this started out as just like a community space. They would host little social events, lessons, and things like that. And they also started doing a summer concert series. And they found that in the 3 years that they've been doing this, the program has gone from 100 participants to 400, which is larger than the little village itself. Another quite colorful example from close by in Calgary are these community lawn chairs. So the Shawnee Evergreen Community Association got 60 of these blue plastic chairs, and they started sprinkling them around the community. So on pathways or little parklets and things like that, and they focused on these free lending libraries. And they found that people have been using them, they've been regrouping them, maybe sometimes moving them into the shade on the hotter days. And also these plastic chairs have started to sort of mark the distinct nature of the neighborhood. And so they're now in the process of collecting data, actually they just finished in September, to see the impact this is actually having on the community through the numbers. And lastly, another example from Scarborough, Ontario. This is the Plaza Pops, which is very hard to say, project that they did. So this is again community volunteers. They got together with the BIAs, some local businesses in the plaza, residents and students, and they converted a few parking spots essentially in the strip mall into a little pop-up plaza, kind of platformy vibes in this one as well. And so they had events, concert series through this pilot, and after the pilot they actually heard back from business owners, and 100% of them said they wanted to see this pilot happen again. And since then, this Plaza Pops experiment has grown to numerous areas across the GTA. So, we're almost done. We've seen a ton of examples of placemaking, all shapes and sizes. And so to conclude and kind of wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a little summary of the elements of, or approaches of placemaking that have helped make each of these initiatives successful. A non-exhaustive list of the key ingredients of successful placemaking, if you will. So, number one, hopefully this has come through. The community are the experts. So as we saw in Rotterdam, in New Westminster, and beyond, the most successful placemaking projects are the ones that are not only backed by the community, but are also initiated or led by the true experts of each community. 2, partnerships are key. Like in the Plaza Pops example that I just shared and many others, most of these projects were successful because they had strong partnerships and collaborative work that went into bringing them to life. So this ensures buy-in, of course, but it also means that there's going to be momentum to keep these projects going beyond just that first pilot. 3, give people reasons to gather and connect. So most of these successful placemaking projects that we'll see around the country and through these examples, they succeeded because they brought people together and they were building connections in the community. So you have to think about, what are people going to want to participate in? What's going to help people interact with each other and with the intervention itself? And again, it's not just placemaking for the sake of aesthetics, although colorful things are also very nice, but with the shared goal of building connections within the community. 4, experiment and iterate. You're never done with placemaking. Again, like Plaza Pops or the platform in Silton, they just kind of figured it out, and all of these ideas have been growing and evolving and have been actually outgrowing some of the communities that they started in. So placemaking projects are best done when they can evolve and adapt to the changing needs of the community. You don't have to wait for a perfect idea or a fully baked solution to start. Just start small. Put out some blue plastic lawn chairs and see what happens. Number 5 is lighter, quicker, cheaper. So bigger budgets don't necessarily mean greater success. In the Pavement to Plaza example that I shared earlier in Vancouver, it really just started with some paint on the ground and some movable seating, right? So it still was shown to have an impact on people's sense of community and their desire to connect with each other. So this approach also makes it much easier to do number 4, which is experiment and iterate. So it allows you to be nimble and keep going and evolving and testing your idea as you go. Number 6, last one, but definitely not least. When we're making placemaking projects, setting out with these ideas, we really have to make sure that they're benefiting the community in an equitable way. So although I've shared mostly success stories today, in many of our projects and research at Happy Cities, we've unfortunately seen that even the best ideas don't always benefit the community in the ways that we intend. So a plaza that maybe cuts off the wheelchair accessibility ramp, or an event that unintentionally excludes a group of community members. As I mentioned numerous times already this evening, placemaking projects should really be created by and for the communities they're trying to serve. So if placemaking, if we're calling it a tool for happy, healthy, resilient communities, we have to think about how the definitions of happiness or health or resilience might actually differ from one group to another, to make sure that we're including the diversity of perspectives that actually make up the community. So to make sure that a project isn't negatively impacting one group over another, it's essential to ask questions like, who's benefiting from this project and who may not be? So truly this could be a whole 30-minute talk in itself. So I'm going to summarize with a quote from our Happy City hero, Enrique Peñalosa, who says, one of the requirements of happiness is equality. Maybe not equality of income, but equality of quality of life. An environment where people don't feel excluded. So, through these stories, we've met some unsuspecting placemakers who are the experts of the versions of their communities that they wanted to see. They also represented groups that are not always at the forefront of conversations about community building or city building. So in setting out to take on placemaking projects, which I hope you all do, we have to ask ourselves, who are they for? Who are the experts of our communities? And in the case of Red Deer, technically that's all of you. This is because the most important ingredient of these happy, healthy, connected, resilient, people-centered cities and communities are the people themselves. So with this, I'd like to return to our opening question and reflect. Would you call yourself a placemaker? You kind of proved me in this answer, but I suspect that if you're in this room, the answer is probably yes, or hopefully that one day it will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherry. That slide that says pedestrian streets boost business, I wonder if you could just send me that slide. I'm going to make a t-shirt. Yeah, that was amazing. We appreciate you for your presentation. We're now going to move into our panel discussion portion of the evening. So thank you, Cherry, for not going far. And if the rest of our panelists could now come up and have a seat, and we'll begin those introductions. Okay, first up this evening we have Susan Veers, Managing Partner of Honeycomb Solutions, based in Calgary. For 12 plus years, Susan has been focused on city building, placemaking, and strategic alliances. Susan successfully rebranded Calgary's East Village and transformed the neighborhood's image from one of the most downtrodden areas in the city to one of its most desirable real estate addresses. Next up we have Kimberly Bone, who is the owner and event storyteller with Creative Twist, an award-winning event design firm, which is based here in downtown Red Deer in this building. She's also the national chair for the Canadian arm of the International Live Events Association and sits on the board of Prime Stock Theatre as general manager. Creative Twist also holds the management contracts for the Scott Block Theatre and Capstone Discovery Bus. Kimberly is a seasoned industry expert who has produced experiential events and live theatre for nearly 3 decades. Her passion lies in helping her clients communicate core messages and branding through carefully designed shared experiences. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Nora Smith, a facilitator in community development with the City of Red Deer. Nora grew up in close-knit communities, cherishing the freedom of the open countryside. In her current role as community facilitator, her upbringing continues to shape her work, emphasize the importance of genuine connections and a simple approach to community engagement. We have a number of prepared questions that we'll be asking our panelists this evening, but we're also going to take a number of questions from the audience as well. So without further ado, we will get into it. Does everybody want to test their mics? The first question that we have tonight is for everyone, so you guys get to decide who wants to go first. What advice would you give to someone who would like to create or get involved in placemaking projects in their community, i.e., how do they get started? Everyone's looking at you.
I think I already answered this question.
I think you did. I think you did.
Start small. Test out your ideas, see what happens.
Okay.
And I would add that go find 2 or 3 more people who have the same passion that you have, and then grow from there.
Can everybody hear Nora? Yeah, good. Anyone else?
I mean, I just think any idea is a valid idea, and if people, I think if people are passionate about where they live and their neighbors and their community, and they really want to, you know, add vibrancy, just, you know, get involved. You don't need permission, you just need to take action.
I'm going to take action by sitting.
Yeah.
I think I'm supposed to be sitting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's better. Okay, thanks for that. Should we go on to the second one? This one's directly for you, Nora. Tell us a little more about the Back Alley Collective and how the Paradise Plaza project came to life.
Absolutely. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, there was a group of stakeholders who got together to design Meet the Streets. There was a mural project at the festival. I was on that project with my colleague, Kelly Andres. And what we found in the first year of that project, I mean, I love the murals in the sense that they're big, they create change, visual change really fast, but for us to develop community, we realized that aesthetics wasn't enough. So the second year on that project, we added a little component called site transformations. So it meant to be a mural and the transformation of the site by that mural to create community. And there's a really interesting little thing that showed up on 49th Street. They were redoing all the infrastructure underneath. We had a group of businesses on that street that were struggling because of loss of foot traffic. And then there was this weird little quiet alley that now existed because the road got shut off. So we gathered this group together. They co-crafted how they wanted to pull a pop-up plaza in that alley to help attract foot traffic and activity. And they called themselves the Back Alley Collective. And the alley was Paradise Plaza. And they have been meeting for, I think, almost 2 years now. And this year they moved it from the 49th Street alley, which is now open, out into the front street. And they have buskers there, and they have artists that come out and just have artists in residence. And the space is meant to be for spontaneous creation. And the community is actually just starting to step in and want to be part. So, and I'm going to actually ask, I think Ben, in the audience, with your Ben. Some of my community members are here, community members who actually work on this. I have third-party lens. Ben, what is your favorite part of that project?
Ben, where are you?
Right here.
Testing.
Oh, that's loud. My voice really isn't that
We'll
loud.
just hold it.
I think the best part of it was watching all of us come together. We had a large, diverse group of business people, as well as people from the DBA, people from City Hall, and watching everybody when we did the initial Back Alley Collective coming together to support the idea of drawing, making something for people to be entertained at. And then this year with the transition from being a back alley thing to full-blown street frontage, how it evolved and people still working collectively together. There were different people involved, different times. And it was just watching everybody work together on one specific project to bring it to fruition. And now we're dealing with the summer season being over. It's watching the expectations for next spring's launch again of having something that is out in the street and hopefully watching all the pedestrian traffic take full advantage of it.
Such a great example, Ben. Thank you. Okay, Nora, we'll come back to you. I know you have a few other people here that we're going to jump to. But Kimberly, as a professional that creates experiences through storytelling, can you tell us a little more about how storytelling plays a role in creating a place? In what ways can placemaking support art and culture in a community?
Well, I think storytelling comes from the people who are activating the space and who are engaging with the space. So, and it's their stories that they want to tell. You know, one of the things that we've done down in Capstone are collaborative art projects and giving people the opportunity to tell a little bit of their story through their own creation. And then that becomes a larger art installation for everyone to enjoy. So the first one we did, we built a butterfly, and that was a bit reminiscent of you know, the evolution of the space and the possibility of the space, and it was just different people putting their own little stamp on this collaborative art piece, and then we had the lantern there last summer, which was designed to look like a building and with windows, and we posed the question of what does home mean to me, or what does home look like to me? And some people, you know, painted family and painted things that meant home, and other people just painted what they were feeling or what they were inspired by in the space. And we got tagged, but the person who tagged it in a square. Just, you know, they took they were respectful of what we were doing, and they wanted to put their stamp on it, and that's absolutely, that's perfect. That's you know, we were excited to see that. And, you know, and we were excited to see people come back and be interested in the evolution of this community story that we were telling. So the lantern was there probably 3 months. And every weekend, people would add their little paint square to it. So I think, you know, art and culture is integral to storytelling. It's integral to placemaking. It's a universal voice that people can share their thoughts and their what makes them excited about a place through art and culture.
That's great. Thanks, Kim. Susan, can you share some examples of the creative placemaking projects that you helped bring to fruition in the East Village in Calgary?
Yeah, well, I guess in the context of East Village, just to give everybody a sort of a sense, I mean, we were building 15 city blocks, adding those 15 city blocks to the city of Calgary's downtown footprint. And on those 15 city blocks, there was nothing. So we were literally starting from a dirt plot and needed to conceive of what do these 15 blocks of city space need to do for the city of Calgary. So a little bit different than my colleague here, we were focused on design of the city and the growth of the city and what the city itself wanted for its future. And so creative placemaking for us was obviously about building those 15 city blocks as a community and making sure that that community connected really seamlessly north, south, east, and west. And so we were as much focused on I call it the software of the place as the hardware. So the hardware for us was very much the roads, the sidewalks, the bridges, the sewer, you know, everything that you need in a community to connect. But then as we were designing the places, we were asking ourselves the question, well, are we engaging sufficiently? Is this right? Do we need to go back to our master plan vision to revisit? We did it many times. We had to go back and make sure that we were on the right track. But as we were building it, literally, we were asking people to come in and witness the transformation. So placemaking for us in the early days was very much about some of the things that already been mentioned here today. It's, you know, can we showcase this piece of bridge that we're building, or this library that we're building, or other things that we're building by painting sidewalks, by creating a concert, by putting a container park up for a season and operating a market, a Christmas market in it. And we have an opera festival. So we were bringing Calgarians into a place, quite frankly, that they hadn't been in 30 years. And so creative placemaking was, for us, critical to educating the populace around, you know, what we were building, but more importantly, why we were building it. And all along the way, we made sure that engagement was at the forefront of everything that we did. And youth played a large part of that. The university students, the colleges, we were, I would say, on a weekly basis, talking to people to make sure that we were getting it right.
You went to the experts, as it were.
We went to the
Yeah.
experts.
Love that. Love that. Thank you, Susan. Charity, back to you. What was the most impactful placemaking projects, or one of the most impactful that you've worked on during your time with Happy Cities, and why?
Yeah, great question. I also feel like I've cheated by already showing you some slideshow photos of my most impactful project. I would say the Rotterdam project is a top one for me. I tried to paraphrase for the sake of the slide deck, but that was most impactful for a couple reasons. One, I mean, I already showed you some of the main reasons, but one of the components I didn't mention was it was really interesting going with our, North American context of saying, walkable streets have to look like this, 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 this. Typically, we're advising on things like that in a suburban context. We're like, oh, we built these cities for cars in North America. There's some easy, obvious fixes that we would normally advise. And then going to a Dutch neighborhood, I don't know if you noticed in some of those photos, like, technically they're acing it from a design perspective. Like, very narrow streets, wide sidewalks, pedestrian-oriented, lots of things to do, bike lanes, everything. So on paper, that neighborhood was functioning perfectly, right? Like there was nothing we could really advise on from the design perspective. So that was really interesting to see and kind of eye-opening to think about the cultural differences from our perspectives compared to the Netherlands, sort of Europe being the gold standard of walkable cities. And the other component I didn't mention, or maybe you picked up on it through the photos in the story, was this neighborhood was largely Muslim, actually. So lots of Muslim people moved to the country, or moved to that neighborhood from other countries. And so one of the reasons that public spaces weren't really landing in this neighborhood was because the sense of, the perception of being in the public realm is very different. So in a lot of Muslim cultures, the public realm isn't really a place you're supposed to be. Privacy is really, really important. So something we would technically see as a sign of success in a neighborhood is if you're walking by, people's doors are open, their windows are open, you can kind of wave to your neighbors. But this is actually not seen as a good thing in that neighborhood. They, really respected their privacy, and they didn't think that was a good thing. And so you'd walk through this neighborhood, and all the shutters would be down, and there wasn't this connection to the public realm. So that really stood out as well, thinking like, okay, we have all these best practices, but we have to be so careful in terms of when we're advising on what and how this is really landing in a particular community. So there's, lots of really interesting components there, in addition to hearing from the youth that they wanted none of us and none of our business there in public spaces. So.
Who is this lady?
I'm cool, I swear.
Thanks, Jerry. Kimberly, back to you. You also happen to manage the Scott Block Theatre. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you work with other tenants and renters to create an arts-centric and active space?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the first things I did when I took over management of the space is we really formalized and established resident companies. So, because we really want to make the space a welcoming and inclusive space, and we want for all, arts groups to want to do their work here. So Bullskit Comedy had been doing a lot of work here, and we formalized an agreement with them. Red Aces Dance, Prime Stock Theater, and Red Year Players. And we worked with them on pricing to make the space more accessible, make it for them to be able to do more of their work here. And again, we looked at all of our rates and tried to, create more opportunity for not-for-profits to utilize the space. And so that's certainly important for us here. Obviously, the other side of the coin in my event world is to bring corporate groups in. And I really feel like that's going to be important for downtown, is having groups come in and realize that there's great spaces in downtown and there's great things happening in downtown. And, so we've had some concerts and we've had magic shows and a mentalist and we're, you know, we're looking at doing some programming in the new year that hopefully will bring more and more people down and newer audiences to experience what it, you know, that downtown is safe, that parking is great, that there's lots of opportunity to experience great art and culture in downtown, and we really want to be a hub for that. Yeah.
Kind of made me want to cry a little bit. Thanks, Kimberly. Nora? Can you share some examples of the local placemaking? Sorry, I'll start over. Nora, can you share some examples of the local placemaking projects that are currently happening in and around our city,
Awesome.
please?
Yes, I want to start with Waskesiu Gardens and Park. So this is a neighborhood that actually kind of broke the mold on how parks were made. Usually what happens is the city will design a park, install it, and the community uses it. In this instance, a group of community members with the community association, they drafted the plan and the vision for the park space. And they broke it out into phases, and they started with the garden. And this is that lighter, quicker, cheaper. They started with the garden, had some garden, then they expanded that. Then they put in the gazebo, and now they're putting in the play structure. And the garden was initially just to get a few more people there. Then you have a gazebo there so people can come and gather and eat. And now you're actually creating a play space. And there wasn't money in the city budget. And this is a reality. Like, the city doesn't have all the money in the world to do all the amenities. And sometimes I think there is great potential in community groups getting together to co-create spaces, because Waskesiu, they fundraise for their stuff, to the point where there's a kid with a lemonade stand giving her lemonade money to buy it for a fence.
That's awesome.
So these are the things that, and because it was like this, there is strong ownership and stewardship of that space. And I know Linda Cullen-Sake is here. Linda, what was your favorite, for two things, what's your favorite thing about that project, and maybe what's next and where people can kind of join in?
Do I have to do something to this?
Oh, no, it should be. I've got two, so let's try this one.
I'm just gonna stay here.
Thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Okay. So I've lived in Waskesiu for 23 years, so I've been participating in that whole activation of that park and the building of a neighborhood and the neighborhood association. So my favorite part, I would say the gardens, as you mentioned, were sort of the best, you know, just people would come down, they bump into other people gardening, compare notes, chit chat. The gazebo went in and there was a place to sit. We started having events like a concert, a movie night in the park, a bike parade for the kids. And the neighborhood has transitioned. It was mostly elderly people when I first moved in, and now it is a tremendous mix of intergenerationality. It's just amazing. So now that we have the playground for kids 5 and under, and it was such a galvanizing of the neighborhood to do the fundraising, apply for grants. Like, we just put the playground in, we were digging post holes, pouring concrete, like nobody with any kind of solid skill set. But we had a level, we had a concrete truck, and we had the will. So that was really well. And then just this last fall, so not this fall, was the second annual Pumpkin Pie in the Park event. So we tend to have events when the weather is nicer and warmer in the summer. But last fall, we kind of thought, you know, just as a send-off into winter, let's have pumpkin pie in the park. And this year we had pumpkin pie in the park and a peek at the playground. So we brought in giant Costco pies, many cans of whipped cream, we made caramel apple spice, we had a coffee bar, and we had 160 people from the neighborhood come out. So what we did, which was really cool, was we cut these giant pies into random slices, some skinny, some monstrously large, and we would just let people, you know, we would say, which piece of pie appeals to you? We had, you know, the older gentlemen sitting around the garden beds on the edges, eating their pie, talking. The teens were collected. Everybody was talking to each other, little kids running around all over the place. whipped cream everywhere. It was sensational. We had music playing. It was awesome, and it's kind of a, keep your eye open for what's coming next. And we're talking about doing some things in the winter, some Christmassy thing maybe, or something where we can go around. But in terms of new Canadians to the area, we have a bit of a density of new Canadians in the neighborhood. And we do door knocking, we put signs out, we have a Facebook page, we have a WhatsApp page, so it's really hard not to stay connected in the neighborhood. And if people see people gathering in the park, people attract people. So as soon as people look out the window, and they think, oh, should I not? Oh, look, there's pie. Food is a great attractor of people. So my favorite part is just how it has galvanized the neighborhood and brought people of all ages together to celebrate the uniqueness and the positivity of the neighborhood. And we look out for each other, so it's just a great piece. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay.
Who's next?
Okay, so we got some sidewalk murals that are by Jontiques. A little bit of background here. We had a business owner who wanted to paint a progressive flag on the sidewalk. And exploring how to do this, she ended up getting connected to a Reconnect grant, which is funded by Family Community Support Services. The purpose of that grant is around social isolation, building new and or deeper connections. So Vicki Finley is the person. So she, all of a sudden her little project about one little flag turned into something way bigger. She went out and she reached out to all the not-for-profits in the schools to offer supportive programming for the LGBTQ community, and offered them that they could paint a sidewalk block of a mural at the spot. And this was under TANUS, so the Trans and Non-Binary Aid Society are the ones that held the grant. 14 agencies created a mural. There was probably 150 to 200 people come paint the mural. The install itself was a community building event. And now that place, that sense of place, is actually for people to come and feel like they belong, that they're not alone. And the murals themselves, interestingly enough, I'm going to chat with Vicki today about this, because there are the agencies, they're like a directory of supports on the sidewalk for that community, which is just brilliant. So, Vicki, what was your favorite piece about that project?
Okay. My favorite piece was the people that came out and worked on the project with me. I looked at myself as just the coordinator. I didn't, the steerer of the ship. I didn't tell them what to put on the sidewalk, just what like that it was for LGBTQ support. And they chose what they wanted to put on the sidewalk. They brought their volunteers from their agencies or their schools. We had, like you said, well over 100, 150, 200 volunteers. It took over a month or several weeks to install. But it was the people that came out and were involved in the process, but it was also the people that have been touched by it during the installation, after the installation, just the community. It touched the community. It touched people that were not necessarily from the LGBTQ plus community. It affected more people than that. It gave people an opportunity to have a space that they could call their own, a space where they were comfortable and felt safe, that didn't exist otherwise. And it brings people, I don't know because I don't follow social media, but I think that there's pictures of our murals, a lot of TikToks, a lot of whatever, tweets or whatever. There's always somebody up there taking pictures of themselves and posting, So it's the people that were involved and the people that it touched that was my favorite part.
Hey, Nora, do you have another example?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Brandon. Okay, good. So we have a common ground garden project. This actually happens to be an urban farming project. There was a community member, Art Van Zanten, who was actually very concerned about local food security. So he approached what was then the social planning department, looking for a piece of land for a community garden that would have the intention of increasing food security, encouraging social enterprise, sharing knowledge, and creating social connection. So there was a brownfield found for that, and it's in the southwest corner of Capstone. So then all of a sudden a variety of interested people started gathering and beginning to meet regularly. They put the vision together, they put together a multi-phase design, and then as it kind of grew and it needed a little bit of more strength to hold some of the kind of insurance pieces and maybe the financial pieces for the granting piece, Rethink Red Deer stepped in as a backbone organization. They got a land use agreement, and the first piece that is already installed over there is a concentric circle hay bale kind of garden. City of Red Deer donated the soil and the compost, and this project has had numerous volunteers, and a really, really sweet project in the sense they've connected with the school, and they've had school kids there learning how to garden. It's like one of the favorite kids' classes.
My daughter was there yesterday.
Okay. There you go. And they also do educational workshops. So Renee, are you here to talk about what's your favorite part of the project?
Thank you. Thanks, Nora. Yeah, it's been quite a magical place, and it's amazing to see how a brownfield can change without even disturbing the ground. Given that it's a brownfield, we are required to grow everything with a barrier in place just to make sure that everything is safe. And it's phenomenal to see the kids come around the corner all excited and ready to spend, no more than 90 minutes on site when they have to head back to school. But the school particularly that was impressive was Oriole Park Elementary. The grade 4s at the time were known as having difficulty with education or learning in general, so the transformation in just one season that this class went through was unbelievable. And they were able to actually take their experiences at the garden and turn it into an application to Canadian Geographic for the Queen's Jubilee Award. And they won not only 3rd place, but 1st place with 2 entries separately. And with that money, donated some back to the project and the rest towards setting up a garden at their own school, which you may have seen in the news recently. So it's literally pollinating from one brownfield site to schools. That's just one example. There's more, but we don't have time to talk about it tonight. But I think in addition to the school and the transformation of the kids' lives are really, the small daily encounters we have on site. And that's random people showing up saying, what's going on here? It's the people helping out in our summer camp, volunteers, the actual participants in the summer camp. It was really cool to see people with no gardening experience come in, learn what a tomato actually tastes like, a black tomato in fact, right? Stuff that people have never seen before, but it's in their backyard. It's tucked away down in Capstone. It's like one of these chance discoveries that people have, and it changes their life in some instances. We had the luck to be able to grow our team this year from 1 person, myself, into 6 people, 7 people even, seasonal staff. And the impact it's had on their lives in just 2 months, 3-4 months, some of them, has been unbelievable. We had Indigenous engagements because we were able to hire an Indigenous apprentice through some of our funding. We were able to secure it through the federal government. And in just those 4 months, how they've grown personally and taking those experiences into social work makes their whole future completely different than at the very start of the season. And we had a harvest supper with a lot of cultural components, indigenously influenced, and looking over to my staff while the young girls were dancing, indigenous dancing with the drummers playing, with tears of joy in their eyes. It was unbelievable, and it was just so moving to be able to have 160 people there crammed in one little space in front of the duck mural, which was a product of the Meet the Streets initiative, and seeing how these things overlap and amplify each other, and how one person's idea, who was bored watching soccer on YouTube, led him to inspire all these people now to come together over 3 years and create these emotional experiences that are literally changing people's lives.
Takes one seed. Go ahead.
So I was 10 years in the making. I think COVID was a game changer. With COVID, they made a request to the city of Red Deer to actually discontinue dismantling and remantling the patio every, fall and spring. And it was agreed to as a pilot project. And live music really started to come alive with COVID because the COVID regs indoors didn't make it feasible. All of a sudden there was 2 PAs and a mic outside one day, and now we had open mic. And since there, the outdoor music program has just snowballed. Other amazing things that have happened now on that patio. It's an entertainment district, and it's growing. Like now you have 4 restaurants, bars, where there maybe used to be 1 or 2. So it is just on that little strip. So Brandon,
Hi,
what's your favorite part of
I get to
that
talk
project?
now?
You do. Brandon actually is right on Cross Street, Brad.
Obviously, huge credit to the City of Red Deer, the Downtown Business Association, just for, having the vision and the wherewithal to create this space to begin with. And I think last year was 10 years, Amanda? So this is the 11th year, and like you said, there'd always been programming, thanks to the DBA and the help of the city. But, out of pain comes joy. COVID really did have an effect, obviously on all of us. But the inability for venues, especially the Velvet Olive. The Velvet Olive is still known and was known for being one of the downtown's greatest live music venues, and when we could no longer do music indoors, Peyton Cameron, one of the hosts and musicians from here in Red Deer, Kyle Key, the owner of the Velvet Olive, and a few other folks were just sitting outside having a chat, and someone just said out loud, why don't we just do open mic outside? And then literally it was like the next day there was PAs outside, and people started to kind of gather a little more safely and responsibly, obviously, at the time, but it snowballed from there. So the stage was built, it was moved more towards the center of the patio, again with the help of the DBA and the City of Red Deer. And then in 2019, the municipal government made an adjustment to the AGLC Act, allowing for municipalities to create entertainment districts. So we spoke to our friends with the city and loved the idea. And again, I keep saying kudos to the city. It's because there's a few of them here tonight, but honestly, loved the vision. And within, I think it was a matter of like 2 months, bylaw was written, it was launched, and like knocked it out of the park. The change, the impact that one thing had, I think, not just on the Ross Street patio and the surrounding businesses, but the city in general. The entertainment district, I should explain, the designation of that means that essentially businesses can serve alcohol past their licensed premise, so past the patios. Quite often we would have guests come to the small patios when there's live music on, and they'd say, can we just go have a beer and sit up there? And we'd have to say no. So with the introduction of this entertainment district, more people came and stayed for longer periods of time. We increased music down there. It was just a snowball effect. And I think Linda mentioned it earlier, the fact that when people see people, they want to be there. That was one of the biggest and best outcomes, I think, is that when people came by, they would see people on the Ross Street patio and see the events happening. I want to be there. So the biggest win, I think, was people coming downtown and staying for longer periods of time, and obviously exploring the rest of their downtown and stuff. So I don't know what the future is for the Ross Street patio. We hope that it is going to stay permanent. Won't put anybody on the spot tonight, but we also know that there's construction coming up soon in the area, so we'll see what happens. But I think the future is bright for the Ross Street patio. It is a great space for people to gather. It's pretty amazing. So thank you, DBA staff and our friends at the city, for keeping that alive and going. Did I do okay?
You did awesome.
Okay.
We also have a project called Growing Community Garden Project. This arose out of the Year of the Garden. They had a video series. A group of 5 people got together with the intent to actually build community in the downtown via growing food and gardening. So they hosted a series of really well-attended design threads. And now they have landed, I think, I'm not exactly sure what their sites are, but Cynthia, if you could just fill that piece in, and then also, what was your favorite part of the project so far?
Thanks, Nora. Is this on? Good.
Nope, give me the remote.
Yeah, we can try, it's hard to tell, it's in the dark, I can't see.
Okay, thanks Nora. So we landed one solid project late this season. And it ended up being an unexpected client. It wasn't one of the ones that we were planning on. So we do have one community garden in place, growing community garden, and that's at the Knox Presbyterian Church right downtown. And it was a great site to start with. So the goal of the project was to activate unused spaces and underused spaces within the downtown core to build community between the different social groups that use the downtown. So this was a great site because it was like a partnership, what you were saying. The partnership was with the church, basically. So we already had a dedicated group of people that would look after the gardens and that were really excited about doing it. So we looked at that as a good success, and we're happy with that first project. And we'll continue to, at this very beginning of this concept, so we're going to continue on with it. And we also realized that because it is a new project, that it will take time for us to understand it, and we want it to change and evolve as we learn to understand it, just like what you were saying. And I'd say one of my favorite parts about the project was actually the design charrettes, and because that brought people together. It was open to the whole community, open to the whole city. Anybody interested came together, and we thought about what these gardens could be and what they would look like and how they would evolve from the ground level. So it wasn't one person that was designing these. It was a group of people, and that was really fun. And they were well attended, and amazingly, ideas were shared, chatting going on, and people seemed to enjoy themselves doing that. So right away, we were building community just through visualizing what these spaces could be like. So we consider that a success as well.
Great. How are we doing for time? We're cutting her close. How many you got left there? Did you single-handedly bring all of these people?
It's important for my role that I don't speak for community. I always love to have community share for myself and get the glory, because they are the ones doing the work, and I absolutely appreciate them and what they do.
They're the experts.
Yeah. I love giving applause to council and stuff, but my heart goes giving applause to community, because you guys are amazing. And I you do.
So you have more.
Well, is Jen, are you here? Jen's not here. Okay, I can, let's be, we're good.
You're good?
Yeah, we're good.
Give it up for Nora. Yeah, I think we're pretty close to the end of our questions for the panel. Does anybody else in the audience have any questions for our panelists? Over here, just behind you, Kayla.
Right in the light.
Is that John? No?
I guess for Susan, if you can kind of elaborate on some of the similarities you see with regard to Capstone and East Village, and maybe some of the learnings that you've had and some of the differences associated with what you've dealt with in a larger municipal center than I do.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks, John. There's many similarities, actually. If you just look at the context of the community and how it's laid against the beautiful Red Deer River, East Village lays itself against the Bow River. You were dealing with some land assembly, parcels of land that the city had maybe used for different reasons, or were maybe not really being used to its highest and best potential, and so you created a vision for Capstone. We did the exact same thing in East Village. I would say in East Village we probably had a little bit more, I'm being facetious, we had a lot more contamination because of a rail line that went through our project. So I think the vision that you have for Capstone, a downtown urban community, it parallels exactly what we were doing in East Village. And I think some of the learnings there were you know, not everybody could get the vision, not everybody wanted the change, quite frankly. The city itself needed to change, needed to densify because it was a growing city. And so, but it took a while to have that idea germinate. We also had 4 social agencies in the city, in the community. And so, so when I started to go to work there years ago, I actually had somebody walk me to my office every day. We had a little brick building on the river. It was disconnected from everything. We later turned it into 3 restaurants, but you already had, interestingly enough, in Capstone, you already have so much. Your retail is already established. We had none of that, so in many ways you're further ahead. But the social context in East Village still remains today, and we built the community around it. So that took a lot of confidence by a lot of people to understand how the vision could be inclusive of everyone. We were not trying to displace anybody. We wanted everybody to come there, and we wanted the people that were there to stay. So there's lots of similarities between the two.
Thanks, Susan. Any more questions? We have one, Ms. Montez.
Thanks very much for sharing with all of us. I'm curious about, we have a community of youth at Red Deer Polytechnique who are at Red Deer. Some live there, some live in the city. What are your thoughts on engaging them in placemaking and specifically engaging them to come to our downtown? Thank you.
Was that for me or general?
Whoever would like to.
I'll start and then you can jump in. It's critical. We were blessed in our project to have Bow Valley College right next door to us. And so through some of their curriculum, we were able to involve them not only in the design, but some of the future uses of buildings. So for example, we had a population of seniors that were living in East Village when we took over the program. There's 800 seniors living in the community. And Bow Valley College had a practicum nurse certificate that we were able to sort of marry those two together. So for us, it was what we weren't expecting happened, which was later on, as students made these connections with seniors in the community, those connections stayed strong, and so these relationships built, and then other things began to pop up sort of organically, which is what Sherry talked about. And still to this day, those relationships exist. So with Red Deer Polytechnic, it's like, I think I've walked it and rode my bike. It's like 1.8 kilometers away from downtown Red Deer. To me, and I think there was a campus downtown at one point. It's critical to have that energy of youth in the city and to have them be, quite frankly, they should be sitting on this stage. We should be listening to them, not me, because they are the future of the city and we really should be understanding what they want, much like your example. But it's absolutely critical that they're involved in all phases and stages, and you've seen that.
Yeah, definitely. I think excellent answer. I don't have a ton to add, except maybe a reflection that often when we do go and speak with youth, they're all interested in it, but they didn't, like in civic engagement processes and urban planning and city building, but it's often lacking in curriculum, especially in the younger years. And what we've been seeing, at least in my work at Happy Cities, is that people are coming to us to go into schools and say, okay, can you teach a quick lesson? Can we start having these conversations earlier? And while that's not technically our main service offering, it's definitely something we've been trying to do more of. And it's nice to see that there's more interest in that too, because as you've been saying, they are our future, and definitely need to be starting to think about these things earlier. And maybe another suggestion or example is we try to keep, we don't want to go in and say, hey, we're going to engage you youth, right? So we try to make things like as fun as possible for them, and hopefully they don't realize what's going on a little bit to some extent. We were trying to reach a group of elementary school students, and we're like, okay, we're going to go and talk about active transportation. They're going to be so bored. So what we did is we created these like wooden cutouts of different shapes of people on bikes and scooters, and everyone loved talking about skateboarding, and so we brought these to them as an art project. We brought some paint, and they got to decorate these different active transportation cutouts, and then we installed them along the flexible bollards, like those white sticks, along a bike lane right outside their schools. And then I thought, oh, let's go check out our artwork on the street. And so during this process, we got to teach them about active transportation at an early age and also get them using the bike lanes or using those lanes as even as just as pedestrians with their families. And so just thinking of creative ways to kind of start planting those seeds, I think is key as well.
I'd also say that we've talked a lot about art and culture, and I think that that's a critical connector for the people that are at the Polytechnic to engage with, you know, what's happening downtown. You know, they're in class, they're full of you know, stressors every day, and it's great to have an opportunity to come somewhere and have a little fun and put your mind into something else, and you know, there's a wonderful facility right downtown that's owned by the Polytechnic that needs life in it desperately, and that would inject a lot in it. You know, it's not, when I run a theater, it's kitty corner to me. It's not competition.
No.
You know, it just add more energy, add more you know, to the area, and you know, I think that art and culture. I spent a lot of years in Toronto, and I saw how art and culture rejuvenated areas, and I just see that as, you know, when I moved back to Alberta 3 years ago, Red Deer 3 years ago, you know, one of the really exciting things I saw was how rich our art and culture community was. You know, yes, downtown was different than it was when I left 25 years ago, but it still has this like percolation of creativity and passion and talent, and yeah, and I just think that that's, you know, something that we can really build on in the city and revitalization.
Well said.
Yeah, I think of this in two lenses. For one, are we looking for students to inform civic process? Then it's good to go for them to get information. In my role, I'm more interested in seeing active, vibrant, sustainable communities. And when I think about that, what really stuck out in my mind is stewardship. If you have somehow created stewardship by citizens of the space, you have succeeded. So how do you actually create stewardship? When you start thinking about that. And then for me, it was like, that is tied to being directly invested in the space. And to be invested in the space, if we want to do that, for one, they need to be like, usually it's close proximity to the space, but it's going to listen for what matters to them. And if you can listen to what matters to other people, not only just get that information, but then co-design that information into your space, then they see themselves in that space. If they're passionate about that space, they're likely to be invested in the space. So that's one thing. The second thing is that opening up, we've got to create really simple, easy opportunities for people to get involved. Because as soon as I put my hand on the shovel, and even if I just stand there and hand out cookies tonight, and I feel like I've been part of this event, and I actually have a sense of investment and involvement in this event.
Well said.
So those are two things that are crucial, and for me, I mean, I think both, you need both. You need, when we need information on processes, it's great to get the information that way, but I'm always curious more about long-term sustainable places where it's a community at the space that stewards the space. I think the third thing for that to really succeed, we need to be very conscious about rotating and sharing leadership regularly. So that's another trap that we end up falling into. We have single leaders. It just ensures sustainability if you actually regularly rotate and share leadership in the group that's gathering.
Love that. Okay, we're getting short on time. We're running late on time. In 60 seconds or less, if you had one thing to leave with us, no pressure, before you guys leave tonight, what would that be?
I'm being on the spot first, okay.
I didn't mean that. I was looking at you.
Me.
but
I'm just gonna ramble for 60 seconds.
You just
while
gave
we walk
3 other
in.
people a minute to think.
I said a lot tonight. I think I really tried to distill my main messaging in those slides. So what I will say, a little bit of a twist to your question, is I'm very impressed by what I've seen in Red Deer tonight, truly. And today I got a lovely tour. It seems like there is a lot of energy and passion in this room and in this community. And I hope that you can continue to build momentum and not give up on the excellent work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
I would say, be brave. It takes every one of us to do the heavy lifting. And I would say, dream big, but in doing that, ask yourself if what you're doing is right for Red Deer. Like, do you know where you want to go, and are you set on that?
Thank you.
I'd say, lean in. Don't just wait for other people to do the thing that you want to have done. You gotta have some skin in the game. You gotta lean in and be part of it, and then you'll see all the work that's really happening. Because I think that there's a lot of people that, look on the outside looking in, going, nothing's happening, and they don't realize, like Nora's cue cards and how many people she's dealing with every day, and how much work is going into the things that are happening. So, be part of it, lean in.
Please come see me. This is my job, and I love working with people who are, like, helping people do the things that matter to them. And that's why I love placemaking so much, is because if you can listen to what matters to people, and they start doing that in a space, you can see the joy of people doing the things they love.
That's great.
And that is the most beautiful thing ever.
Here, here.
Yeah.
On that note of coming to see Nora, so everybody is going to, that registered for the event. We'll get an email, I believe, tomorrow, Kayla?
Yes.
Morning. With some information about any grants or programs that are available if you're thinking about doing your own placemaking project. There's tons of resources there. There's also, I'm sure Nora got the most of you in the front, but there is a little, some ideas for future events similar to this that we'd like your input on. So make sure if you haven't done that, go put your blue stickers on some sheets. Cherry, Susan, Kim, Nora, thank you guys so much. Safe travels, we'll see you next time. Oh, and eat some cookies on the way out.